This thrilling story begins by showing a man named David, who is just waking up in his fancy apartment. David is the CEO of a private company and is extremely wealthy. He also cares a lot about his looks. His appearance is everything to him in life. He couldn't ignore even the smallest thing related to his face. We are then shown his house, which is very luxurious and spacious. David quickly freshens up and heads to his office. He owns a very expensive car that moves at high speed. David drives that car fast on the road, but something strange catches his attention. There's not a single person or vehicle on the road. The place looks completely deserted, as if everyone has vanished. This makes David a little uneasy, because in a city like New York, it's never this empty during the daytime. He is quite shocked by all this. But at the very next moment, he finds himself back on his bed. It was all a dream. David breathes a sigh of relief and gets out of bed. We then see that there's a woman in his bed too, probably his girlfriend. But later, it is revealed that David changes women every week like this. That is, David is a playboy, and he has very high-end tastes. Now in reality, David takes his car out again, and this time, the roads are normal with people and vehicles everywhere. This makes him very happy. David immediately picks up a friend and goes out for a drive. Although he also has to go to the office, he reaches quite late, because it's his own company, and he can go whenever he wants. As soon as he arrives at the office, his secretary briefs him about his schedule, when his meetings are and what he has to do. David quickly enters an important board meeting where all the head members are present. They seem a bit upset because they've been waiting for him for quite a while. But David doesn't care about any of that. He talks to them arrogantly, right to their faces. The other board members have no choice but to agree with David because he is their boss. We are then shown a flashback from David's life when he was a child. He was very mischievous and energetic. But at that time, his father had passed away, leaving the entire private company in David's name. Since then, all the head members have been angry, as such a huge company was handed over to a little boy. Back in the present, we see David wearing something on his face. It's a mask, which he's wearing for a certain purpose. In front of him sits a doctor, who seems to be his psychologist, gently trying to make him understand something. David then says that for some time, people have been trying to murder him, and he's fed up with it, because to this day, he even gets visions of them. The doctor was telling David that inheriting all of his father's property at such a young age might be the reason why many board members and people in the company don't like him. He also said that David doesn't manage things properly, and maybe those people want to remove him from the picture. David becomes deeply depressed by this. He had inherited all that property, it rightfully belonged to him, and he wasn't going to give it to anyone. But the big question still remains, what exactly happened to David's face that he now has to wear a mask? That will be revealed soon. Now we flash back to a bit earlier in time. David was throwing a big birthday party, inviting all his friends and employees. His friend Brian also came to the party, and he had brought along a very sweet friend named Sophia. For some reason, Brian seemed quite impressed by Sophia. He kept looking at her again and again. Everyone was enjoying themselves, partying in David's massive and luxurious house. Suddenly, one of David's employees, named Thomas, approached him and told him everything. How the board members didn't like him at all and how they were planning to take control of 51% of the company's shares. That would give them the majority stake and allow them to seize ownership of the company. Although Thomas was telling David the truth, David wasn't really paying attention. His focus was entirely on Sophia. Ignoring Thomas's warnings, he went straight over to Sophia and started talking to her. He even took her to his upper floor apartment, which was even more spacious and luxurious. Sophia was stunned to see such a huge place. Coming from a normal family, she wasn't used to such grand living. David showed her many paintings and tried all sorts of ways to impress her. It looked like Sophia was gradually getting impressed too. They talked about many things, and later David offered to drop her home. He even spent a little time at Sophia's place, where she told him about her life and her family. She shared that she wanted to become an artist and work in documentaries. That's why she had left her home and family and come to New York City, because she believed it offered many opportunities. One day, she would fulfill all her dreams. David really started liking Sophia, and he wanted to get closer to her. He kept trying to make that happen. Back in the present, David is with his doctor, who keeps telling him how handsome he looks and wonders why he hasn't married yet. David replies that he was waiting for the right time, but then a terrible accident happened, which completely changed his life. Yet for some reason, David is afraid to share all the details of that incident with the doctor. The doctor decided to keep David in the basement for his treatment, as there was a risk he might run away. Several guards were stationed there to keep an eye on him in that condition. Now we are shown the scene where David is at Sophia's house, and the two of them are happily drawing each other's portraits, enjoying the moment. Their understanding had grown quite strong, and David was planning to keep his relationship with Sophia as just a friends with benefits kind. He didn't want to get deeply involved. It was getting late, and as David was about to leave, Sophia kissed him very sweetly, the moment David had been waiting for. He was very happy about it and immediately got into his car. But just then, David runs into his ex-girlfriend Julie, who had somehow found out that David had been having fun with another girl. Julie, feeling jealous, sarcastically asked, "So how was your experience with your new girlfriend?" David felt a little awkward and embarrassed, but Julie then invited him to come with her for a long drive. David couldn't say no to her, so he got into the car. Julie kept driving while telling David that she couldn't keep a friends with benefits relationship with him. She actually loved him deeply and wanted a real relationship. David started getting confused, as he had never seen Julie in that way before. As he was thinking about all this, Julie suddenly started speeding up the car. David told her to slow down, but in anger, Julie began driving recklessly fast. Eventually, the speed became too much, and David felt that the car was out of control. He told Julie to stop, and even tried to take control of the steering wheel himself. Suddenly, the car lost control and crashed off the side of the road into a ravine. The front part of the car was completely destroyed, and the crash was so intense that the entire vehicle was ripped apart. What happened to David and Julie after that accident is something we'll find out soon. But now, we are shown a scene from a little earlier, where David is perfectly fine and meeting Sophia. He was very happy to see her and was telling her about a terrible dream he had. He said, "After leaving your house, I ran into Julie. She took me in her car and was driving very fast, and then, we had a horrible accident." So David thinks that the accident was just a dream. But then, Sophia asked him, "Are you sure that when we met at the party, all of that was real and not a dream?" David was left deeply puzzled and lost in thought. The scene now shifts to the psychologist, who was asking David about all his dreams. David, using gestures, explained that after the accident, his entire face was destroyed. "My jaws were completely shattered," David explained. "They had to be rejoined, and after that, I was in a coma for many months." This entire incident had a massive impact on his business as well. While David was unconscious, the board members took advantage of the situation and transferred all the shares to themselves. Though Thomas, the same employee, tried to help David regain control of the business, David didn't have the strength or courage to take that risk. His condition had already deteriorated due to the accident. And the one thing that had made him most attractive, his face, his good looks, was completely destroyed. That's why David began wearing a mask and rarely went out. He avoided showing his face to anyone. Now we see a scene some time later, where David, wearing his mask, is secretly following Sophia. Sophia had no idea what had happened to David. She assumed he had just gone away and left her. And David, how could he even tell her? How could he show her that his face had been completely disfigured after the accident? So he simply watched her from a distance, followed her quietly. Several months after the accident, David visits the board of the world's best plastic surgery company. He wanted them to reconstruct his damaged face. But after examining his condition, the surgeon said, "We can't fully fix this. Your face is too severely deformed. Attempting a full reconstruction could even cost you your life." Still, David insisted, "I need a solution." That's when they gave him an aesthetic mask, made of real human-like skin. But David was deeply heartbroken after seeing it. This wasn't a permanent fix, he couldn't wear the mask forever. At home, he felt completely lost, unsure how anyone would ever accept him again. He looked far worse than before, and it was destroying him from the inside. Still, David decided that he would try to meet Sophia once more. Sophia was practicing her dance, and just then, David quietly approached her from behind. She was startled for a moment, but when David began to speak, explaining how he had been in an accident and that his condition had worsened since then, Sophia listened and began to understand. She comforted him and clearly told him, "I don't care about your face. You'll always be a good friend to me." David then invited her to a nightclub party, and Sophia agreed to go. Later, at the nightclub, Sophia was already there, and after some time, David also arrived, wearing his mask. Coincidentally, David's friend Brian was also there, and he was talking to Sophia. David noticed this and began feeling confused and insecure. He started thinking that maybe Sophia didn't like him anymore, and that perhaps she was starting a relationship with Brian instead. So David went up to Sophia and began to flirt with her, trying to charm her like he used to. But this time, David noticed something different. Sophia wasn't laughing like before. In fact, she seemed uncomfortable with his advances. And maybe, it was all because of David's disfigured face, which no longer had the appeal it once did. David even tried to dance with Sophia, but she grew more and more uneasy. Feeling deeply disappointed and heartbroken, David eventually walked away from her and out into the open. Time passed and the night carried on for others, but David kept drinking heavily. He tried once more to talk to Sophia and even apologized, but she didn't listen to him at all. That's when Brian pulled David aside and said, "Maybe she just doesn't like you that way anymore. You should stop bothering her." Hearing this from his dear friend, David realized that maybe Sophia and Brian were in a relationship now. And there was no place for him anymore, especially now that his face was ruined. Crushed by this thought, David walked away and collapsed on the road, unconscious from drinking too much. He spent the entire night lying there in that condition. But the next morning, something good happened. Sophia showed up and helped David to his feet, taking him away from there. No matter how much David's face had changed, Sophia was still a good friend to him. She didn't believe in the friends with benefits concept. Sophia gently told David, "I loved the David you were before. But after the accident, it's not just your face that changed, your behavior did too." This made David a little upset, but Sophia still stayed by his side. Now, we see David again in the basement clinic with the psychologist, where his treatment is ongoing. David had started drawing Sophia's portraits again and again, because he missed her terribly. He wanted to relive those old, happy moments he had with her. The psychologist then revealed to David, "Your surgery has already been done. The surgical team performed it very skillfully. The mask that you are wearing now, it's designed to heal your wounds gradually over time." But strangely, David couldn't remember any of this clearly. It felt like he was still trapped in some kind of dream. Then we're shown a moment where David goes to Sophia, and for the first time, she removes his mask. By that time, all the wounds on David's face had healed. Sophia tells him he looks just like he did before, and after that, the two begin spending joyful moments together. Sophia starts falling in love with David and tells him never to leave her. One night, David, Sophia, and Brian are sitting together at a bar, enjoying themselves, as David finally had everything he wanted. But suddenly, David notices a man staring at him intensely. This man was one of the board members who had operated on David and treated him. David is confused. Why was that man here and why was he staring at him like that? Still, for the moment, David is happy because his face has healed. He returns to his apartment and falls asleep peacefully. Just then, he feels someone's hand from behind, assuming it's Sophia. But when he turns around, it's not Sophia, it's Julie. David is terrified and tells her to leave. He even tries to call the police, asking Julie what she's doing there, but Julie insists that she is Sophia. David is completely confused. When the police arrive, instead of arresting Julie, they take David to the police station for questioning. Thomas also shows up there and tries to get David out, but first he shows him a photo of Sophia with multiple facial injuries. The police suspect David is responsible for hurting her. David is completely baffled, as he hadn't met Sophia since that last time, and it was Julie who had come to his room unexpectedly. Because Thomas paid a large sum of money, David is released from custody. As he steps out of jail, people around him are yelling, telling him to wake up. David begins to wonder if all of this is a dream or if it's real, though there's no proof of either. Outside, Brian is waiting for David and starts yelling at him, blaming him for what happened to Sophia. He demands to know why David hurt her so badly that her face was disfigured. David insists he didn't do it, and that it was Julie in the room with him, not Sophia. But Brian reveals a shocking truth: Julie had died in that last car accident. How could she possibly be in David's apartment? David is stunned, struggling to understand what's happening. Is this reality, or is he dreaming? Angry and confused, he storms off. Though Sophia wasn't his girlfriend, she meant more to him than just a friend, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That night, David returns to a bar, where he again sees the same man from the surgical board, the one who had been following him. The mysterious man approaches David and says, "I have the answers to all the questions that are troubling you." He explains that during David's surgery, something strange was discovered. David's brain had begun functioning at an unusually high level. While the average human uses only a small percentage of their brain, David was using it at 10 to 20% capacity. In a way, he had developed abilities that no one else in the world possessed. When they tested this, they found that whatever David thought or said would actually influence others. David initially thought it was a joke, but when he said that everyone in the bar should go completely silent, and they immediately did, he was terrified and ran away. Until that moment, he had no idea about these powers. The scene then shifts to the psychologist asking David how he distinguishes between reality and dreams. David replies that he has no idea. He doesn't know what is real and what is a dream. By this time, David had undergone surgery and was wearing a mask over his face. In another scene, David is shown completely healed, and he goes straight to meet Sophia at her apartment, but is shocked to discover that all the photos and belongings in the room belong not to Sophia, but to Julie. This means that all this time, the woman he thought was Sophia was actually Julie. Just then, Julie appears and hits David on the head, knocking him down. When David asks her what's going on, she insists that she is Sophia. David's mind begins to unravel. He can't understand what's real anymore. He realizes that the woman he had spent all this time with wasn't Sophia but Julie. But then Julie goes inside and comes back out looking like Sophia, and seeing her, David is overjoyed and hugs her. After reuniting with Sophia after so long, they go out and have fun, even getting intimate. But suddenly, Sophia transforms back into Julie. All of this leaves David completely mentally unstable. He couldn't even identify what was happening anymore. Later, the masked David is seen talking to the psychologist again. The psychologist explains that at one point, David became unstable and, in that state, ended up killing his own girlfriend. Everything David is doing and thinking now is just pulling him deeper into that same delusional space. The psychiatrist tells David that if things continue this way, he could end up as a criminal, but until David tells him the full story, he can't arrive at any final conclusion. Meanwhile, in the basement where David is sitting, a security guard is watching TV, and on the screen, there's a segment about Bennis the dog along with an advertisement for a company called Life Extension. Suddenly, something clicks in David's mind when he sees the Life Extension logo. He becomes extremely unstable, starts screaming and banging on the door. Seeing his condition, the psychologists and others present decide it's time to tell David the truth. They take him in a car to the place where everything began. The company is indeed called Life Extension, a company that places depressed individuals into a kind of cryogenic sleep, during which any kind of dream or imagined reality can be fed into their brains via a program system. The dream could be anything, even things they never imagined, but to the sleeper, it feels completely real. David begins to wonder if all of this is a dream or if it's real, though there's no proof of either. At the company's facility, the psychologist shows his appointment letter and takes David to the manager. A staff member greets them who looks eerily similar to Sophia, and David can't stop staring at her. She begins showing them around and explains that many customers who were deeply dissatisfied with their real lives had undergone the procedure, and the dreams they experienced during cryosleep changed their lives for the better. The psychologist then introduces David to a manager named Dev, who explains the machines. These are cryogenic sleep chambers programmed to induce lucid dreams. If David chooses, they could freeze his body entirely and preserve only a few brain cells, allowing him to live out dreams that feel indistinguishable from reality. They also tell David about the man named Ben, whom he had seen several times in restaurants. He was actually a tech support member from the company, inserted into David's dreams to help guide him. Upon hearing all this, David becomes even more disturbed and starts questioning whether everything he has experienced so far is even real. Fear grips him, and he tries to run away from the room. But now, he begins to notice something shocking, that everyone around him. Everything around him had completely emptied out. On the streets, there wasn't a single person or a single car in sight. It was the same eerie state David had felt at the very beginning. He began screaming like a madman and called out for tech support. Suddenly, the elevator doors opened, and inside was none other than the tech support guy, Ben. David immediately realized that Ben must know everything about what was happening to him. He told Ben that he had been living in this world for years now. Ben then began explaining everything. He told David that the way he remembered coming out of the bar drunk, being rescued by Sophia, and taken to her apartment, none of that had actually happened in reality. In fact, David had never met anyone named Sophia in real life. She was only a creation of his own mind, a character existing in the lucid dream program he was experiencing. This clearly meant that David was not in the real world anymore. He was inside a sleeping chamber run by the company, Life Extension. The truth was, on the night he got drunk and collapsed on the street, no one came to help him. There was no Sophia. David had somehow made it back to his apartment alone and then spiraled into deep depression. He stopped socializing, stopped communicating with people, and shut himself in. His mental condition continued to deteriorate, and it became clear he wouldn't survive. So the private company decided to include David in their cryosleep project. They placed his body in a machine and put him into cryogenic sleep, launching the dream program, which meant David now lived in a dream world. It was a dream world where David could imagine anything and bring any character to life, but without realizing that it was all a dream and not reality. Ben revealed everything to David and then gave him a choice. If he wanted, he could wake up from cryosleep and return to the real world, where his face was so damaged that no one wanted to be around him. Or, he could continue to live in this dream world, where he looked perfect and could spend the rest of his life with Sophia. Standing before him were Brian and the same psychologist, who were actually just part of the program. As David continued to think, new characters kept appearing exactly as he imagined. Ben finally laid two clear choices in front of David. Now it was time for David to make his final decision. Where did he really want to go? Even though this imaginary world felt perfect, where he was complete and had everything he wanted, David had realized it wasn't real. He wanted to spend his entire life with Sophia, but deep down, he knew that staying in a dream would never make it true. After thinking deeply, David finally decided he would not live in this fantasy world anymore. He would return to real life. No matter what his face looked like now, at least he would have hope to one day find the real Sophia and tell her how he truly felt. With his mind made up, David went to Sophia one last time. She touched him gently, and for a moment, he felt peace. But he knew it wasn't real. Ben then gave him the final instruction: if you want to wake up and return to your real life, you must face your biggest fear. David had always been terrified of heights. So, to escape the dream, he had to conquer that fear. Determined, David walked to the edge of the building. Without hesitation, he jumped from the massive height. As he plummeted downward at high speed, memories of his entire life flashed before his eyes: his childhood, his family, how his mother had cared for him, and how he had drifted away from his parents as he grew older. In those final moments of his dream, David realized just how important his parents were. He had been chasing a vision that had no connection to reality. Filled with regret, he accepted that maybe this fall was the end he deserved. But then, just when it seemed like his dream self had died, we were brought back to the real world. David's eyes open. He has awakened from cryosleep. Now back in reality, David is ready to live his life on his own terms, no matter how broken or imperfect it may seem. And with that, this emotional and adventurous story comes to an end.